Hi, I'm Tammy Potter, and welcome to the Pregnancy Process Podcast, a show designed to help you navigate the hugely transformative journey to motherhood, where you'll hear the unique experience of experts in this area and the incredible stories of women sharing their conception, pregnancy, and postnatal journeys so that you can have a healthier, more informed pregnancy. In today's episode, Motherhood Refuelled, I talk to Brooke Harmer of the Well-Nourished Mama. Brooke is a passionate advocate for maternal health and nutrition, whose personal journey has led her to become an inspiring voice in the realm of women's wellness. In this powerful episode, Brooke reveals how a radical shift in nutrition became her lifeline to overcoming conception challenges and navigating postpartum anxiety. If you have ever felt depleted by motherhood or struggled with your relationship with food and your body, then this episode is absolutely for you. So get ready to discover how proper nutrition can revolutionize your pregnancy journey, boost your postpartum mental health, and elevate your overall well-being. Brooke, thank you so much for your time today. It's fantastic to have you here with us.
I'm really excited for our conversation today.
You've got such an interesting story around your pregnancy and nutrition journey. So if it's okay with you, I'd really like to start there.
I had studied nutrition for a little bit in college, but I was actually majoring in business and marketing. So it wasn't super on my radar at the time. After some years of not really getting to eat and exercise the way that I wanted to, and just trying to get back in shape, I had swung the other way and fallen into disordered eating. And then that was perpetuated by COVID. I had just recently gotten married. We were stuck at home, and I was just terrified that I was going to get a flat butt and I was going to be chubby and that all of my hard progress was just going to go out the window. So I picked up running and soon learned that if I ran more and ate less, that I got even smaller than I was before. So this just perpetuated that cycle and that feedback loop of trying to be the smallest version of myself and accomplishing that in the name of being healthy, watching what I eat, exercising, all those things. I was masking behind what's normally a good thing, but I was using it for not so good reasons, if that makes sense. So then my husband and I decided that it was time for us to start our family, and we were 6 or 7 months into trying for a baby after getting off of birth control, and there was no baby. I wasn't pregnant yet, and I was feeling really, really discouraged. And one of our family friends sat down with me. He actually had experience with his ex-wife who suffered from very, very severe anorexia. So he had saw a lot of things in me that I wasn't aware of and that my husband saw but didn't quite know how to start a conversation about. And so he sat down with me and he's, hey, listen, I know that you think that you are doing what's best for your body. And I truly believe that you do what's best for your body, but this is not how you do it. What you're doing is actually setting you farther back from all the goals that you have of having a healthy baby, having a healthy pregnancy, and just feeling good as an individual, because you don't feel very good right now, do you? And I was like, I don't. I really don't feel good. And he's okay, I'm here to help. Your husband is here to help. Let's help you get to where you want to go the right way. So I did a 180 and I really started to dive deep into the nitty-gritty of nutrition and how it affects your body, and understanding why the choices I was making weren't serving my body in the way that I wanted, and what I needed to do moving forward to actually feel good and be healthy. And thankfully, 3 months later, I was able to conceive naturally, got pregnant with my first baby, had a healthy pregnancy, healthy delivery. And then at about 4 months postpartum, my anxiety was through the roof. And we were too poor for psychiatric help or any sort of outpatient care. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to see if there's anything I can do with my diet and my lifestyle. Turns out there's a lot about our diet and our lifestyle that affects our mental health and our milk supply if we're breastfeeding. And so I got into another nutrition journey, but for a different reason this time, and learned a whole lot about the nuances of our diet and our lifestyle and how they affect our mental health, especially during that postpartum period. And I just realized that as women, we're extremely underserved. I feel, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but at least in America, I feel like we're extremely underserved. And I just decided that I wanted to do my part to try and help other moms so that they didn't have to struggle with infertility. They didn't have to follow every diet trend or every influencer on social media and then feel frustrated that nothing's working. I wanted to provide them real scientific research and facts and personal experience that shows that I know what I'm talking about and really walk the walk, and then also help them through every stage of motherhood. So thriving during pregnancy, healing postpartum, having an amazing milk supply, losing the baby weight and feeling confident in your skin again, and just helping moms see that nutrition is at the foundation of it. But there are, I don't want to say right and wrong because it's not that black and white, but there are certain principles that are more true than what we've been led to believe. And so I've just made it my mission to share that with every mama that I can.
What an amazing journey. And there's so many ways that we can go there. And I think you're absolutely right. Women are underserved. We're slightly different here in Australia, where thankfully we do have a medical system which provides care either free of charge or definitely at a much discounted rate if you qualify via certain things, especially for mental health. Sadly, I know that during COVID that they really increased that. However, I know that they are now cutting back on the amount that they support in the mental health era. But talking about that whole COVID era, it's really no wonder that you felt like there was, because everybody felt so out of control. I don't know about where you were, but even here in Australia, we literally lost our basic human rights to do anything. We weren't allowed to see people. We weren't allowed to leave our homes. We weren't allowed to go to work. Our workplaces were shut down. Like, we literally lost our basic human rights. And so when things like that happen, there's certainly an aspect when we feel so out of control of our lives, there's only certain things that we can control, and our bodies and what we put in them and what we do with them is one of those areas. So I feel like you are probably not, sadly, you're not alone in the experience that you went through where you felt, and I don't know whether this is what happened with you, when people feel out of control of their lives, they focus on controlling the things that they can. So it makes me sad to know that you're probably not the only one that experienced the effects of COVID in this particular way. And hats off to you for actually managing to get through that on your own and actually find a way out of that on your own without support. I think that's incredible. And I'd really like to talk to that. But before we do, I think it's something that you said really struck me. And that's that you were trying to be the smallest version of yourself. And I think that is something that is so intrinsic to women. Like, why are we trying to be small versions of ourselves? Why can't we embrace being the biggest? And I don't mean physically, but why can't we embrace being the biggest, best version of ourselves? Why do we need to continue to try and make ourselves small to make people around us feel better about themselves? I think that's definitely something, as women as a whole, we need to support each other in. And I guess that's why you do what you do and I do what I do. And that's supporting women to be their best self rather than trying to make themselves the smallest version of themselves. And I think there's a key there, right? But if it's okay with you, can we talk about how you actually managed to change that cycle of disordered eating? Can you walk us through that? Because not only did you change your weight, not only did you fall pregnant, but you also worked through the relationship that you had with both nutrition and exercise.
I think the biggest thing for me was debunking a lot of the food myths out there that we have been taught as women. And it's weird because a lot of the things I feel like are, like you said, targeted mostly towards women. I don't hear a lot of men worrying about fat in their food. Oh, I need the low fat version. Like, we don't tell men to eat low fat, but for some reason, it's part of our culture as women to eat low fat. So, trying to debunk a lot of those food myths and really understand the science behind each macronutrient and what our body needs to thrive. So I've already mentioned it, but the first one was understanding the role of fat in the body. I was under the assumption that fat makes you fat. And so I was on an extremely low fat diet. I was on fat-free milk. I was on low fat cheese. I was terrified to eat things like avocados and nuts and seeds. If I did have an egg, I only allowed myself to have one egg because heaven forbid I have more than 6 grams of fat. Like, it was wild. So I learned that dietary fat is crucial for so many things in our body, especially as women. Our brain is more than 50% fat, and it is fueled by dietary fat to keep it thriving, to keep it attentive, to help it retain information and make memories and make connections and innovate and all of these amazing things. So dietary fat supports our brain, which supports our mental health, right? Then you think about our hormones. Our hormones are built with the building blocks of protein, but they are fueled and regulated by dietary fat. So, by definition, if you are eating a very low fat diet, your hormones don't have what they need to be hormones. So, that's why a lot of times we'll see women like me who are on a low fat diet are having a hard time getting pregnant because their estrogen, their progesterone, their thyroid hormone, all of these different things aren't being supported because there's a giant gap in the diet. So the very first thing that I did is I just dove right into eating fat again. And when I tell you the joy that I felt not limiting myself to how much avocado I was allowed to eat was like unparalleled. Not just because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm allowed to eat avocado, but also it made my body feel so good. I finally had energy. I could think clearly. I was satiated after I ate meals. And I was like, is this what it's like to function? Because this is great. So the first thing I did was I started incorporating more fat in my diet. And the second thing that I did is I actually started eating enough, period. When your body is malnourished for an extended period of time, it begins to adjust how it distributes nutrients, how it uses what energy is circulating in your body, and what bodily processes it prioritizes. So, for example, if you don't have enough nutrients, your body isn't going to care about growing hair or getting pregnant because those are less important than pumping blood and oxygen throughout your body. So, understanding that like you need enough calories to just like function on a daily basis. So because I'd been in a calorie deficit for so long, my body was so used to functioning in survival mode where it was like, I don't know when I'm going to get my next meal. I don't know how big it's going to be. I'm terrified to do anything that's non-essential for life. So I had to slowly ease my body back into feeling safe again and recognizing, oh, I'm consistently getting food. I'm consistently getting enough food. I now have enough energy and safety to bring back all of those non-essential functions that are going to help me feel good. And I would say those are the two biggest things that I did. Not being afraid of eating dietary fat and then just eating enough calories in general. And it was the most transformative process.
Yeah, absolutely. Your body is an incredibly smart being, right? And so your reproductive system is non-essential. There are a number of systems in your body that are non-essential, and it exactly from survival mode perspective. And because we're such ancient beings, I think we're ancient beings having a modern experience, right? And I think we forget that. So we forget that in the ancient times, if we are literally running for our lives or you're moving from one plane to another and you've got a massive traveling caravan of people and food is scarce, then pregnancy is probably not going to be the most survival centric kind of process for your body to be going through because of how much it draws down on your nutrient stores. So then when you are in times of limited supply, it shuts down certain things to make sure that you can survive. So I have a question actually, and if you don't mind answering this, what was a typical kind of day's food like to you prior to making all of these changes? This is interesting for me because I'd like to know, when you're talking about adding all this stuff in and adding in normal calories, what prior to falling pregnant and making all these changes, what would a typical day's kind of food and a typical day's exercise like?
I prefer to exercise in the morning. That's when I have the most energy. So I was exercising 2 times a day back then. So I was doing like 60 to 90-minute heavy strength training sessions at the gym. And then in the afternoon, when it was warm and sunny and I had had lunch and needed a kind of a refresher, I would go on a run anywhere from 3K to an 8K run. So I was exercising 2 times a day. And then for my breakfast, it was probably like a piece of toast with low calorie butter. And when I say butter, I can't believe it's not butter, like vegetable oil.
Right.
And then I probably had like some strawberries and 2 or 3 egg whites. So you think about it and you're like, okay, I've got bread, and I was choosing multigrain bread. So I was like, it's okay because I'm choosing multigrain bread. So I was eating multigrain bread and egg whites. Those have protein in them. My body needs protein.
But there's 30 calories in an egg
I know,
white. There's
exactly.
no calories
But my
in
brain
there.
was like,
Yeah.
protein. So that my brain was tricking me. And then I was like, oh, and then I had strawberries. So I had my fruit. But like you think about it and you're like, that's what, 200 calories? That's nothing. And then I would go straight to the gym and lift weights for nearly an hour and a half. And then I would run in the afternoon. My lunch was probably a hearty salad. So it probably had chicken in it, and it probably had lots of spinach. It had a 0-calorie vinaigrette type dressing, some fat-free feta cheese, maybe like a tiny little sprinkle of pecans or pumpkin seeds or something like that, and like maybe a small glass of milk on the side. So again, not very hearty, but in my brain, I was like checking all the boxes. I got my greens, I got my chicken, I've got cheese on there. I'm not afraid of cheese, but it was fat free. So just like listening to breakfast and lunch.
There's also no carbs in there either.
You're probably sitting there, okay, but I was genuinely tricking myself because I didn't trust my body. And I think that's the third thing that I'm going to add to my list that I forgot to say is I didn't trust my body. I didn't trust the cues it was giving me of, hey, I'm hungry. I'm tired. I would be like, no, you're not hungry. You're not allowed to be tired. I just fed you. I'm not allowed to eat for another 3 hours. Like I wasn't trusting my body. And I would get so stressed out if my husband on the whim decided that he wanted to go out to eat and we were going to eat some sort of takeaway fast food situation because I hadn't planned my calories for breakfast and lunch to account for whatever we were going to eat. So I didn't trust that my body knew what to do with the food that I was about to eat. So a lot of it was also like reestablishing trust of, hey, my body's hungry. Even though I ate 30 minutes ago, that means I need to eat some more food, and not being afraid to do that and teaching my body, you know what to do with the food that I'm going to give you. If I eat too much, looks like I have extra energy for weight training tomorrow. Like just changing that mentality and then applying that to how I plated my food and saying, okay, my body needs energy. My body needs food. It's going to know what to do with it. So instead of doing a 0-calorie vinaigrette, I'm going to add olive oil on my salad because I need the calories, I need the fat, and it's going to fuel my body.
And so what would a typical dinner look like for you? I'm just trying to get my head around this. And also I feel like this is important because what I'm walking you through here, there may be someone that's listening to this podcast that's trying to fall pregnant, that's doing exactly what you're doing and thinking that they're doing the right thing for themselves. And I'm sure that I've come across people like this in the gym environment where they are smashing themselves on the treadmill every day and not eating very much, but trying to fall pregnant, or they're living in a really high stress environment with work and they're not eating much. And then at the end of the day, they're going to massive HIIT classes and smashing themselves with more stress on their body, more stress on their hormones, because that's how they deal with their stress release. And then they're probably not eating enough. So you've had your piece of toast with your 2 egg whites and strawberries, your salad for lunch, no snack in between. There's no carbs in your salad
There
at
might have been a
lunchtime.
small snack probably around 3, but it was probably a protein bar because I was like, my body needs
Right.
protein, but there's no carbs again. So yeah, I might have a small protein bar or like half of a granola bar because carbs are scary. And then dinner, it was probably some sort of lean meat like chicken or a white fish with maybe some sweet potatoes and some Brussels sprouts and maybe another little side salad. And I think all the fat that I let myself have was like the little spritz of cooking spray that I used for my vegetables in the oven and for my chicken on the stove. And that's about it.
When you look at that from an overall perspective, I would say almost what you're putting into your body, you're almost expending in energy in terms of your training, an hour and a half weight training, plus, 8K run at a reasonable pace. That's just under 60 minutes, maybe 50 minutes.
And not to mention, it was in like 35-degree weather too. So it was like really hot outside.
When I look at that, and I guess this is really important, if there's anybody out there that is trying to fall pregnant and this is ringing some bells for you, feel free to reach out to either of us, and we're happy to help in facilitating anything that you need. Now, you also spoke about your postpartum anxiety and how nutrition helps with not only mental health, but then the connection with your milk supply as well. Can we talk to that a little bit? Because, and this is probably quite a large question, from a postnatal mental health perspective, can we talk about how nutrition can either positively or negatively impact your mental health? And then subsequently from that, how your nutrition affects your lactation. And then on top of that, I know that there is definitely a link between lactation, breastfeeding, and mental health. I know that's a big question, but there's definitely interlinks there. So if we can talk about your journey through that, and then we can tease out the smaller pieces, that'd be great.
When it comes to mental health, especially when you are pregnant or postpartum, I do want to just give the disclaimer, and I know you probably have said this before, that it's such a multifaceted thing. I don't want any of our listeners to think that I'm claiming that if your diet is perfect, that you won't have mental health struggles, or that if you do have mental health struggles, the only thing that will fix it is diet. Neither of those are true. What I do want to convey is that nutrition is foundational in our mental health. It should not be ignored when you're trying to figure out a root cause for your mental health struggles, and it shouldn't be ignored as a solution while you're trying to work through it. One of the things that I've learned in my research over the years, and I can actually say with confidence that this is true because I have experimented with 2 different pregnancy and postpartum phases, because I have 2 kids, and my second baby and everything that came with her is so different from my first baby. So I want to preface this by saying that. One of the things that I've learned in my research is that nutrient deficiencies are a very major contributing factor to depression and anxiety, full stop. On top of that, they are very, very common during the postpartum era. So, what that tells me is we need to be really intentional about how we are nourishing our bodies during pregnancy so that we are not depleted going into postpartum. And we also need to be very intentional about how we recover from pregnancy and childbirth so that we are setting ourselves up for success during postpartum. Some of the most common nutrient deficiencies that play a major significant role in depression and anxiety are the B vitamins, vitamin D, magnesium, iron, zinc, selenium, and there's a seventh one that I can't remember, but there's 7 that I've researched. And you think about that and you're like, okay, so does that mean that if I just take my prenatal vitamin that I'm all good? Not necessarily. We know that prenatals are supplementary to what we're doing, and they're meant to fill in the gaps. They're not meant to be the only source of nutrition for us. So that's a major thing for postpartum mental health, is understanding that nutrition is foundational and paying attention to that while you're pregnant. And then as soon as you have your baby, having a plan in place of how you're going to nourish your body back to health. Now, like you asked, how is this connected to milk supply? A lot of people will say that diet doesn't impact your milk supply. That is the biggest lie I've ever heard. And the other thing that they'll say is the only thing that you can do to increase your milk supply is to feed more, whether that's on the breast or with a pump. That is true, but with a little caveat. If your body doesn't have enough nutrients and support to allow lactation to take place in the first place, let alone actually make milk, then it doesn't matter how much you feed baby. You can't pour from an empty cup, right? You can't drive your car on an empty tank. So recognizing that the way that you choose to nourish your body is not only going to be foundational for your health as the mom, but it's laying the groundwork for your body to say, all right, we are taken care of as the giver. Now it's time to give because I have enough nutrients and support to give. Now I can produce milk. And if you understand that dynamic relationship, then it will completely transform your lactation experience, whether you are breastfeeding or pumping.
In terms of postpartum recovery, because you've just mentioned that you had 2 completely different journeys from pregnancy, postpartum, and then you've done that again and they were completely different. I'd like to talk to that if that's okay. And I'd really like to know, because you have mentioned that you weren't able to connect with services, and the American health system is totally different to what it's like here in Australia. So here in Australia, they are actually very good. There's always gaps where they could do better, especially when it comes to women's health. But there is access to lactation consultants. There is access to mental health services, especially in this vulnerable population. And when I say vulnerable, they're not vulnerable like they're weak, but there's a lot going on. There's a major transition in their life, which when you're going through a huge transition like pregnancy, motherhood, it can make you vulnerable to and susceptible to things like postpartum depletion, postpartum mental health issues. So that's what I mean when I say vulnerable. Women are not vulnerable when they're pregnant. They're still very strong and capable. But before we go down this path, I just want to note that what you're talking about is exactly why I made the decision when I started the pregnancy process to not focus on the postpartum side initially, and to actually really make sure that women are well taken care of and well educated in the pregnancy side of things, because it begins prior to conception. But that pregnancy, the way that you set yourself up in pregnancy and the things that you do really does have the potential to positively impact how you enter your birth, how you enter that initial postpartum series, but also how you progress further down the track as women. You've got, depending on when you fall pregnant, you've got menopause coming up, and what you do in this kind of stage of your life really can positively, or I don't want to say negatively, but it can really positively impact the trajectory of your health span and lifespan further down the track, which is why this stuff is so important. But going back to your postpartum anxiety and milk supply, I understand that you didn't have access to people to help you with your mental health, and potentially not to help you with your milk supply, because it sounds like you had to just figure that out on your own. Can we talk about how you did
Sure.
that?
Thankfully, I had a background in nutrition. I didn't get my university degree in it, but I had studied it. And I had also taken some statistics classes. So I understood how to read a statistical analysis in published research. So that was very, very helpful. Basically, what I did is I just tried to understand how nutrition played a part, and if there were certain nutrients that I could focus on, or certain things that I could manipulate in my diet and my lifestyle to further support lactation and my mental health. And it took some digging, but I did end up finding research that talked about what's a really good example: the role of vitamin D in not only mental health, but also milk supply. And so I was taking it like one nutrient at a time. I was like, okay, what's important for my body to function? I wonder if that's important for my milk supply too. So just trying to like reverse engineer it that way and find those very specific papers that said, yeah, we have found an association, or yes, there is a statistical significance in this research that shows that when you do this, it will help with your milk supply. So I basically just DIY'd it, always making sure that there were very clear signs that I wasn't going to hurt me or my baby. And I just went from there. And I will say, I know some people are going to go, when I say this, but I did lean more towards holistic, naturopathic medicine. I don't know what you guys refer to it in Australia, but for us, it's kind of like not the opposite of traditional Western medicine, but it's more like focusing on the body as a whole and finding natural remedies through like herbs and foods and meditation before jumping to just like putting you on some medicine or taking this organ out of your body or whatever. So I did try to lean more towards that way, and that's where I did find a lot of my facts and my research that are the foundation for what I teach my mamas to do today. It's all backed by research, of course. It's just a different approach to what you might hear from your traditional doctor in a hospital or in your clinic that you go to when you're pregnant.
And so, in terms of what you teach, because you've mentioned principles around the pillars of health, can we talk to that a little bit? So, what are you teaching your well-nourished mamas at the
What I
moment?
teach is that when your body is optimized, everything else will fall into place. So if your body is optimized, you can lose weight safely and healthily after you have your baby. If your body is optimized, you will have a much smaller chance of struggling with mental health as a mom because you're taking care of your body. If your body is being taken care of, you will have all of the capacity that you need to breastfeed or pump successfully and nourish your baby. So, some of those foundations are protein, minerals, and then making sure that you are listening to your body's cues. So, a lot of times women will say, I have to exercise every single day. And I'll say, okay, also, if you didn't sleep well and you're dragging your feet at 9 o'clock in the morning and you are absolutely stressed because your baby is sick, probably not the best thing for you today. Not because exercise is bad, but because it's not going to serve you today. Your body's energy is better spent with your brain trying to problem solve what to do with baby and making sure that you eat enough and giving your body the rest that it needs during the day because you didn't sleep the night before. So, understanding that you come first as the mom. I often say that maternal health, at least in America, maternal health is really neonatal care disguised as maternal care. So anytime you go to the doctor, they're always asking you about baby. Anytime you have a concern, it's always, what is baby doing? Okay, that's awesome. We just took all the time to grow our baby. We want them to be alive and thriving, but also that's not possible if we're not okay. So making sure that us as the moms are the priority. And if that means you have to tell your toddler, I can't play with you right now. I need to finish my lunch, and they have a tantrum for 15 minutes, that doesn't make you a bad mom, in my opinion. That is you saying, I can't show up and be the mom that you deserve if I do not have food in my body. So I'm going to put food in my body and then I can play with you. And it's going to be rough at first, but now my toddler, he's almost 3. I've been doing this for a minute. He gets it. And he's, okay, tell me when you're done. Or he'll bring his toys over and play at my feet because he knows that mom values having food in her body. And I'll tell him, hey, buddy, I can't play toys if I don't have energy in my body. And food gives me energy. So I need energy in my body. It's that little mindset shift of recognizing that it's not selfish to take care of yourself and it's not selfish to put yourself first. That's, I think, going to be the biggest thing for my moms and our listeners today is recognizing that we've been told a narrative that is not serving us or our families. And it's up to us to change that narrative so that everybody can be blessed by our choices and how we show up as moms.
Absolutely. Now, you've mentioned nutrient deficiencies in the postpartum recovery. B vitamins, D, magnesium, iron, zinc, selenium. Can we maybe talk about some nutrients or ways that you can get those nutrients into your body?
Yeah, this is like my favorite topic right now. I'm actually writing an entire book just for the first 6 weeks of postpartum recovery for this exact reason. So I'd love to talk about this. So when you think about your B vitamins, this is mostly going to come from animal meat, dairy, and fortified grains. When you think about iron, again, that's going to be your animal meat. And some plant-based sources would be legumes, so like beans and chickpeas. And then your spinach, although you do have to eat a lot of spinach to even count that for iron. When you think about magnesium, you can just really think about any fruit or vegetable. Those are going to have a good amount of magnesium in them. I will say I personally supplement with magnesium every single day because I don't think we get enough magnesium from our diet, no matter how hard we try. I'm a nutritionist. I don't get enough magnesium in my diet. So focusing on the foods that have magnesium, but also filling in the gaps is something that I do. You think about selenium, this is mostly going to come from Brazil nuts specifically. If you eat one Brazil nut a day, that is 100% of your recommended daily intake for selenium.
And in pregnancy, that's 2.
In pregnancy, it's 2. Now, you do have to make sure to check your prenatal vitamin because too much selenium can flip a monster on its head super, super fast. So if your prenatal does have selenium, then maybe think about the Brazil nuts a little bit more. But if not, definitely Brazil nuts. Some other sources would be fatty fish. And then pistachios is a nut that is coming to my mind as well. So that's another one. Really, at the end of the day, it's just eating a variety of all of the different food groups. Now, I know this is tricky because some people are vegetarian by choice. Some people are plant-based or vegan by choice, and that's totally fine. But recognizing that optimally, if you're having a variety of everything, you should be getting the majority of the nutrients that you need. And then your prenatal or your multivitamin can fill in those gaps from there. If you are vegetarian or vegan, I definitely recommend working with a certified nutritionist or dietitian to help you understand how you can fill those gaps in a very targeted way because animal products are so nutrient rich. This is not me trying to sell you on like switching your diet. It's just a matter of fact, right? Animal products are rich full of minerals and protein and amino acids. And if you choose not to eat them, then it's important to recognize that that doesn't mean your body doesn't need them. It just means you have to get them from somewhere else. So at the end of the day, it's eating a variety of all foods. And then for postpartum recovery specifically, there is a specific protocol that I put my mamas on to optimize recovery. So this is going back to my first postpartum versus now. I'm about 8 months postpartum now with my second. So my first postpartum experience, as soon as I had my baby, I was like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm still eating all the healthy foods and I'm getting enough calories. But I was having a lot of smoothies, a lot of salads, and a lot of raw foods right away in those first 2 months. I've since learned that that is not the best way to approach your nutrition when you're recovering from childbirth specifically. It's not even just pregnancy, it's like mostly childbirth that we're talking about, and trying to help your body come back to equilibrium. The reason being is because your body is going to stay in fight or flight for up to 6 weeks after you have your baby. And when your body is in fight or flight, it is not prioritizing digestion or nutrient absorption because it's more concerned about your heart pumping blood, your eyes dilating, and your muscles in your body being ready to like run at a moment's notice, right? So, because of that, if we eat cold foods, or raw foods, or meals and recipes that have 12 or 15 different ingredients, it's adding 2 or 3 extra steps that our body doesn't need at this point in our recovery. So I'm not saying that smoothies are bad or that salads are not healthy. What I am saying is they're not the best option. So if you truly, truly want to feel your best in those first 2 months during recovery and set up yourself for long-term success, you'll focus more on simple meals that have no more than 8 or 9 ingredients, meals that are really rich in animal protein, especially red meat. I know that's controversial for women. And then focusing on meals and foods that are warm. So if you, let's see, what's an example of how we could switch it? So maybe you like overnight oats. Instead of overnight oats, make fresh oatmeal. It's not that you can't have the oatmeal, let's just change how we eat it. Or maybe you have baked oatmeal that you put in the oven. For me personally, I love having a protein shake every day just because I don't want to eat a ton of meat all the time, but protein shakes are cold. So what I did is I just warmed up my milk and then I put the protein powder in. And because I like chocolate, it tasted like hot chocolate. So that's what I did for like the first month or so while my body was healing. And I can tell you with absolute confidence that this second postpartum has been not like polar opposite, but just like exponentially better than last time. I still feel like I recovered well last time, but if I didn't sleep well, my whole day was ruined. If I exercised too much, my day was ruined. If I had something stressful happen with work, my day was ruined. This time, I believe, because of how I recovered and how I treat my body now, I have the resiliency to take a really hard night and still function during the day and not scream at my kids. I have the resiliency to still get in some light movement and not feel like I have to lay on the couch the rest of the day. My husband is a member of the United States Army, and he unfortunately deployed 6 weeks after our baby was born this last time around. And so I was on my own for 4 months while he was gone with my 2 kids, my 2-year-old and my newborn. And that's really stressful. But because of these principles, I felt more resilient to that stress and I had more capacity to show up for myself and for my kids. So I know that was a super long-winded answer. Hopefully you guys are still listening. But basically, it's understanding that postpartum is not just you're back to normal because you're not pregnant. Postpartum is unique, just like pregnancy is unique. And so if you can treat postpartum for the unique situation that it is and put it through that lens of, I'm going to be very intentional with how I nourish my body right now, then it makes going back to normal so much easier and so much faster as well.
And I think a good way to look at that is that there is a fourth trimester in pregnancy. So the fourth trimester is from birth to 12 weeks post-birth. So the process or the pregnancy process is actually a 12-month process. People think that it's 9 months. It's actually not. It's 12 because it takes into account the fourth trimester. So you still need to be nurturing yourself and your body and taking care of yourself as well as you were when you were pregnant in that postpartum phase. And absolutely, like everything that you're talking about is 100% aligned to the same things that I talk about, and that postpartum phase, those warm, nourishing foods, easily digestible, and then slowly making changes as you go. Because you also have to think about, from a organ perspective, it takes 8 weeks for your organs to just settle back down. It takes 8 weeks for your uterus to come back down. And your digestive system does not just go from, because it slows down during pregnancy, and understandably for a large number of factors from hormonal to physiological. So you've got your digestive system and your digestive tract that's gone from like this to actually settling back down, and then it's like being slowed down because of hormones, and it doesn't just switch back on overnight. It's still a little bit slower. So even those first meals, and you see this on Instagram a little bit, the first meal, and mum's like digging into these first meals that maybe like massive trays of sushi, but that's actually the opposite of what you should be doing with your body. And those first meals should be very warm, very easily digestible, and just slowly making changes as you progress through there. A lot of what we've been talking about is under nutrient supply. And I feel like when I look at the world as a whole, the over nutrient supply, people that have an excess of nutrients or excess of, let's say, calories, because they're high calorie, low nutrient density. These kind of people, where they're potentially overweight instead of underweight, they're getting too many calories, too little nutrients. That, I feel like that's a lot of what we're dealing with in the world at the moment. People that are eating too much of the wrong foods. Is there anything different that you would do for them than, say, someone that was a little bit under nutrient supplying?
For my mamas who do fit in this camp of overconsumption but under nutrition, I would not even focus on calories at all. And I would just focus on making better choices. I think when we think about eating too much food, we think about people who only eat pizza and French fries and Uncrustables and like all these packaged things from the store and from restaurants, right? It's still possible to eat too many calories, even if you're not eating a lot of those things. So instead of focusing on the caloric aspect, because really we don't ever actually know perfectly how many calories your body needs or how many calories it's burning on a daily basis. It's always a guesstimate. What I would say is focus more on what you are eating instead of how much you're eating. Because if you're eating the right foods, your body will be able to send the right cues to help you regulate how much you eat, if that makes sense. So let's say, I know this might be extreme. I don't actually know anybody that does this, but let's say that you are eating McDonald's, for lunch every day because you work out of home and that's the restaurant that is closest to your work. And then you come home and you just grab like a frozen pizza from the grocery store. So instead of saying I have to eat less pizza or I can't have a burger, I can only have chicken nuggets from McDonald's, how about instead we try meal prepping a lunch on Sunday that will get us through Wednesday. So we have lunch for work for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And that lunch that you made has, let's say it's like a really big salad, but it has avocado and quinoa and full fat cheese and an olive oil vinaigrette, and it's got chicken and it's got roasted vegetables and all these things in it. Maybe that's still the same amount of calories as the burger and French fries that you were eating, but because it's the right kind of food, your body's going to be like, I feel so good. And then over time, your body will be like, actually, I don't need that whole frozen pizza. I just need 3 slices. So it's not that you had to get rid of the frozen pizza. It's now your body is figuring itself out and you can say, I'm okay with just 3 slices. And then over time, you'll be like, you know what? That pizza doesn't actually sound good anymore. I wonder if I could grab a pre-made deli sandwich. And then over time, you'll start to make these changes without realizing that you're swapping, or that you're eating less and that you're building up more nutrients, but it's because you focused on the type of food, not the quantity of food, if that makes sense.
I think that's such good advice. Food quality is so important. And I have one last question, because I know that you're probably got limited time because your babies are sleeping at the same time, unusually for today. So that's great. And so before we push our luck too much,
Okay.
I have one last question. And that's, what's the one thing you wish all women knew before having a baby?
I wish women knew that you can feel even more like yourself after you have kids, and that you can feel amazing after you have kids. I feel like the narrative right now is your body is just going to be sad and floppy, and it's going to have these wrinkles, and you're not going to be able to lift as much, or you're going to pee your pants, or you're never going to look good in a bikini again, or now that you're a mom, you don't really have a personality anymore because it's always about your kids. I feel like the narrative is just like expecting to get lost, like losing yourself. And while I do agree that there is such a radical transformation that happens, that you'll never be the old version of yourself again, that doesn't mean that the new version of yourself isn't going to be strong and mentally attentive and happy and beautiful. What I've learned is that if we can approach it by saying, the old me is gone, the me where it was just me and my husband and we had all the time in the world and all the capacity to do whatever we wanted, whenever we wanted, however we wanted, that version of me is gone. But that doesn't mean that I can't be happy now. It just means that it's different. And if you can give yourself grace and take the time to discover who the new you is, and then give her a pep talk and say, we're strong, we're here, we have hobbies, we can have fun, we can laugh and enjoy motherhood and still feel like a human being at the end of the day, then you will start to choose things that fit that narrative and actually feel amazing. My body now, it might have stretch marks, it might have some loose skin that I try and tuck into my pants, but it is way stronger than it used to be. Not just because I grew and birthed and nourished two babies, but because the way that I train is different now. And the way that I nourish myself is different now. And so my PRs in the gym and my PRs in my runs are way better than they were before I had kids. And nobody ever told me that was possible. Nobody told me that I could have a higher PR at 8 months postpartum with my second baby than I did prior to having my first baby. But it's totally possible. So don't let yourself fall into the trap of assuming that you're just going to be lost and that there's nothing you can do. There is so much on the other side of pregnancy and having kids. And the other thing, you can still have a fantastic relationship with your spouse after you have kids. A lot of people are like, oh, just wait. You guys are going to hate each other. 50% of marriages end in divorce. It's just a matter of time. My marriage is so much better than it was before we had kids. But it's because we set that standard for ourselves and we said, that's the reality that we're chasing. What are we going to do to make that our reality now? And it's made all the difference in my motherhood journey.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I definitely have a few points on that. I think that the maternal metamorphosis is literally what you go through. It is the maternal metamorphosis, and something that I talk about with a lot of the women that I work with is that you choose the parts of yourself. We all have parts of ourselves that we don't like. We all have parts of ourselves that we love. And as you go through the maternal metamorphosis, You get to choose which parts of yourself that you leave behind and which parts of yourself you take with you through the fire as you become a new mom. You get to choose. And then on the other side, you also get to choose again who you want to be. And I think that's incredible. And I think if you look at that transition and that transformation, it's an opportunity to step into a new version of yourself. And I think if you embrace it like that, if you look at it like that, I think it can be an incredibly beautiful, transformative time. And you are absolutely right. Sadly, we have marketing and media telling us and focusing on the pain points, because that's how you've studied this at university. Pain points are what drive people. Being in pain is what drives someone to make change. And I think there's too much focus on the pain points to try and move people to purchase, as opposed to what you're saying is like focusing on the nicer side of things. But sadly, a lot of human nature is they only move because they're in pain about things, and that's what media and marketing targets. So that's a really beautiful message to leave with, is don't always focus on the pain points. It's a beautiful transition, and you can make it what you like, and you can have a better, fuller, happier life on the other side. And absolutely, I will put up my hand and say 100% you can be stronger on the postpartum side than you ever were in the pre-pregnancy side. A lot of my clients are testament to that. So thank you for reiterating that. And thank you so much for your time today. It's been so wonderful talking to you. I've really loved our conversation, and I hope everyone listening has as well. So
thank you so much for having me. I hope we can continue to connect in the future.
And if you're hearing this message, I want to say a huge thank you, because it means that you've listened to this entire episode. Of course, if you have any questions about the things that we covered in this episode, or want to know more about me or my other projects, you can find me on YouTube and Instagram at The Pregnancy Process. For those currently in their conception or pregnancy journey, you can apply to join my complimentary but private community, the Preggy Training Crew. And you'll find my community application and social media links in the episode description. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, I absolutely encourage you to share it with other women just like you. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.